I'm your host, Stephen Lassie, and welcome to This Day in Church History. From time to time in this series, we're going to lay a theological foundation so that the audience understands why any particular event or individual may bear religious significance, as in some instances, it is not overbearingly apparent. One of my favorite authors, Ellen Gould White, makes this statement in her book, Education. She writes, "The Bible is its own expositor. Scripture is to be compared with Scripture. The student should learn to view the Word as a whole and to see the relation of its parts. He should gain a knowledge of its grand central theme, of God's original purpose for the world, of the rise of the great controversy, and of the work of redemption. He should understand the nature of the two principles that are contending for supremacy, and should learn to trace their working through the records of history and prophecy to the great consummation. He should see how this controversy enters into every phase of human experience, how in every act of life, he himself reveals the one or the other side of the two antagonistic motives, and how, whether he will or not, he is even now deciding upon which side of the controversy he will be found." Now, the question should be asked, can we trace these principles throughout history as she has suggested? I believe the event we look at today in this episode will validate her thought. Now, if you're not familiar with the great controversy view or theme, you may be familiar with dualistic theology that pervades many religions, whether they're monotheistic or polytheistic in practice. The great controversy theme will be evident as we delve into our first story. The Roman Emperor Nepotianus came to the throne on this day, June 3rd, 350 AD. Nepotianus was a part of the Constantinian dynasty. The emperors that reigned in this dynasty would come to power by usurpation. Nepotianus came to power after Magnentius' revolt caused Titianus to flee the city. Instead of employing the diplomacy that we're familiar with today, it was more of a scratch and claw to the top. It was this selfish behavior that is prevalent in our world today that Christians are called to overcome. The great controversy is a tension that exists between the principles of love and selfishness. This is something that is evident in the fighting that occurred between the prospective Roman emperors. Now, only 27 days later, Nepotianus would lose his life when killed by Magnentius' general Marcellinus. As Jesus said, "All they that live by the sword will die by the sword." In 1095 AD, Pope Urban II urged all of Western European Christians to recapture holy lands taken by Muslims in the conquest of Levant. It was not for the purpose of proselytizing the Muslim world, but it was an attempt to stomp out their authority and regain complete power in the Western world, particularly over the regions that were deemed holy. It would be 3 years after Pope Urban's urging, on the 3rd of June 1098, that the Catholic Crusaders would recapture Antioch, which is known as modern-day Turkey. The Siege of Antioch took place during the First Crusade in 1097 and 1098. The first siege by the Crusaders against the Muslim-held city lasted from the 21st of October 1097 to the 2nd of June 1098. Antioch lay in a strategic location on the Crusaders' route to Palestine. Supplies, reinforcements, and retreat could all be controlled by the city. Anticipating that it would be attacked, the Muslim governor of the city, Yagi Sian, began stockpiling food and sending requests for help. The Byzantine walls surround the city presented a formidable obstacle to its capture, but the leaders of the crusade felt compelled to besiege Antioch anyway. The Crusaders arrived outside the city on the 21st of October and began the siege. The garrison sortied unsuccessfully on the 29th of December. After stripping the surrounding area of food, the Crusaders were forced to look farther afield for supplies, opening themselves to ambush, and while searching for food on the 31st of December, a force of 20,000 Crusaders encountered a relief force led by Dukat of Damascus, head into Antioch and defeated the army. However, supplies dwindled, and in early 1088, 1 in 7 of the Crusaders was dying from starvation, and people began deserting in January. A second relief force, this time under the command of Ridwan of Aleppo, advanced towards Antioch, arriving on the 9th of February. Like the army of Dukat before it, it was defeated. Antioch was captured on the 3rd of June, although the citadel remained in the hands of the Muslim defenders. Corboga began the second siege against the Crusaders who had occupied Antioch, which lasted from the 7th of June to the 28th of June 1098. The second siege ended when the Crusaders exited the city to engage Corboga's army in battle and succeeded in defeating them. On seeing the Muslim army routed, the defenders remaining in the citadel surrendered. Canterbury had been over a year without an archbishop when Henry II of England nominated his chancellor Thomas for the post. Thomas protested to Henry, "I am certain that if it were to so happen, the love and favor you now bear towards me will speedily turn into bitterest hatred." Henry did not think so. Thomas had been the bold and vigorous agent of his policy so long that the king expected he would bring the church to heel. Becket resisted accepting the promotion, although Theobald, the last archbishop, had hoped and prayed for him as his successor. Through the urging of a cardinal, Thomas was finally swayed to accept the post. On the 2nd of June, he was ordained priest, and on this day, June 3, 1162, the Bishop of Manchester consecrated him. As Chancellor, Becket had lived a life of great wealth. He had fought brilliantly beside the king and been a vigorous champion of his monarch's interests. Nonetheless, he had remained personally devout. Whatever his faults, his noble character could not betray any trust which he undertook. Holding the former Archbishop St. Anselm before him as his model, he became a devout, austere, studious, pure, and energetic archbishop. The willful king and strong archbishop were sure to clash. Of the issues at stake, none rankled the king more than clerical privileges. Monks, priests, crusaders, students, and the servants of churchmen were immune to civil trial, being tried instead under canon law. Consequently, many escaped serious punishment despite serious crimes. In 1164, Henry issued the Constitutions of Clarendon. These quite properly brought most trials under the purview of the king. Any cleric convicted of a crime in an ecclesiastical court had to be handed over to the secular authority for punishment. The power of excommunication was somewhat abated. Clerics were bound to the customs of the land, the common law. No longer might they appeal to the Pope for redress from the king's legal decisions. Tricked, he claimed, into accepting these, he was told the Pope had agreed to them. Becket soon recanted his acceptance and refused to sign. At stake were traditional prerogatives of the church. Forced to flee into exile, he tried to resign his see. The Pope refused to accept the resignation. The king levied huge fines on Becket and forced his relatives into exile. Efforts at reconciliation failed, and Becket's stubbornness was partly to blame. Not until 1170 did Becket return to England, his principles intact. In frustration, Henry wished allowed to be rid of the independent archbishop. 4 knights took him at his word and chopped Becket down in front of Canterbury's altar. Becket, who could have escaped, refused to do so. He died bravely. "I'm ready to die for my Lord, that in my blood the church may obtain liberty and peace. By the name of Almighty God, I forbid you to hurt my people, whether clerk or lay." Because of Becket, Canterbury became the most visited shrine in England. The Frankish king, Clovis I, was the last of the leaders of the Germanic tribes of Western Europe, whose conversion to Catholicism weakened the resistance to the emerging Holy Roman Empire. However, it is not Clovis I that we remember today, but his wife Clotilda, who died on this day, June 3rd, 545 AD. As always, I am your host, Stephen Leslie, and thank you for watching This Day in Church History.